because this is a free-flowing conversation. So we'd love for everyone to be a part of the conversation. We're probably going to show you some pictures that will be floated around. So it'll be great if you can just move a little to the front. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Fireside Chat, which is part of our land conversations at the People's Pavilion, as our director Murli Tumarugudi calls it. We also call it the Restoration Pavilion, as you can see the branding everywhere. My name is Apurva Bose. I'm a project coordinator at the G20 Global Land Initiative, and I'm incredibly honored to be the moderator for today's session. It's also a session that I'm very excited about because in most of the panel discussions that we do, we always talk about successes. We share our success stories. We talk about the best practices. We talk about what's the best outcome out of a project, right? But the fireside chat that we are having today is all about failures. It's about failures in land restoration. And we have a distinguished environmental scientist with us who has an extensive experience in restoring landscape affected by mining. Dr. Aleksey Alekseenko. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Apurva. It is my pleasure and honor. I hope you can hear me, right?
I mean, it's supposed to be a fireside chat, so let's just say that we have some music to accompany the fireside chat. As you can see, we have probably a cup of cocoa with us. And
yes, and since the format is the fireside chat, and normally when you have a field trip and you join the fireside conversation, you dress like that and you drink something.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I mean, it's always wonderful to chat up with Aleksey because we've worked together in the past with Dennis, who's my colleague sitting in the audience. So it's always lovely to be here chatting with one of the funniest people I know. And I'm sure you'll all discover that in the conversation as well. So just to give you a little bit of an insight into Aleksey and his extensive experience of 15 years in land restoration across diverse geographies such as Colombia, India, and South Africa, to name just a few. He currently leads UNU Floris's branch in Weisswasser, Germany, focusing on sustainable post-mining transitions, particularly in the Lusatian lignite mining district. His work bridges science, policy, and practice to revitalize mining-affected ecosystems. So as I said, today's conversation will be about failures in land restoration and how it can be a stepping stone to success as well. So in our previous conversation, Aleksey, we've spoken a lot about your personal journey over the past 15 years. So what I really wanted to know is, you've seen a lot of successes, but a lot of failures as well. So what have they been like? Can you give us a little bit of an example as to what you have seen as failures in land restoration projects from around the world?
Thank you, Apurva. So let us take off the ridiculous caps. But now you remember, the format is the fireside chat. And let me start with a story that happened last year when we embarked on our journey of collaboration with the G20 Global Land Initiative. We were invited to take part in the scoping mission to India. So together with Dennis and other colleagues, we traveled to the country. That was my first time there. And the aim of that scoping mission was to assess the current state of land restoration adopted in two very unsimilar and unlike regions of the country. The first one was with the coal mines, and the second one was with the iron mines. And there we witnessed very different stories. I mean, not only when we compare the commodities mined, but also depending on the management practices and the ability to learn from the mistakes. The success stories were also very, very diverse. And with that, I would like to start with the first example. I've brought several stories to share with you today and to start the conversation here in this format. And for that, I've also printed several photos from those trips. And the first one comes from India. This is the landslide failure. This is the only photo that was taken not by myself. This is from the drone, and it was shared with us. So here, Apurva, you can see the terrible consequences of that mismanagement that happened there. I would like now to circulate it among the audience. I will do the same with the other pictures so you can have a look at them. Thank you, Dennis. With that, we explored the area and we've been working on the report and on the suggestions on how to improve and how to avoid such failures in the future. After 2 months of extensive work and writing and reviewing of this final document, we submitted it to policymakers and to decision makers there. And now we hope that the story of mistakes will somehow facilitate the future effectiveness of restoration efforts in the region. So I've got some other examples as well, but let me save it for the continued discussion that we have in this half an hour chat.
Absolutely. I think a lot of things that you spoke also talks about how these experiences underscores how much we can learn from setbacks, right? And restoration efforts, especially in mining related landscapes, often faces very complex and unique challenges. According to you, what are some of these challenges that you have seen when it comes to, when it comes to these situations, and how do you generally address them, and or in your organization or in your experience, how have you seen them being addressed?
So let me start with the unique challenges that you have mentioned. Normally, the unique challenges can be revealed. They can be revealed thanks to the disastrous effects that they cause. And let's say if we speak about some large scale happenings or the disasters that cannot be hidden, then these unique circumstances become a matter of public discussion. But there are also some others that are maybe discussed behind the closed doors, or maybe they are even elephants in the rooms, as they are obvious for most professionals in the industry, but they are still oftentimes ignored. And with that, I would like to show you the second picture. This is from Africa. And here you see the soil stockpile. Yes. That soil stockpile is many meters high. And what happens to the soil after not decades, but just after years or sometimes even months of being stored like that? It is the terrible degradation. This happens first because of the natural decay processes and decomposition of the nutrients and organic carbon substances of humic acids and others. Then it is nitrogen, then it is phosphorus. And after storing soil like that, it is already the failure at the site even before the start of land restoration there. So reusing this soil is a challenge. And unfortunately, we have witnessed this mistake so many times worldwide. Unfortunately, Africa is not the unique place on earth where we may see this. And that's a typical issue, and that's a typical mistake that leads to consequent failure in land restoration.
We often hear whatever that you've said in reports, or we read it in different places, but I think seeing a picture, seeing the example visually always makes such an impact, or puts things into perspective for all of us. And Often at times, I think when there are failures or when there are setbacks, we have to be adaptable while tackling them, right? And the concept of failing or failing forward, as we've heard oftentimes in our sector, have you seen this mentality being used in your projects, or have you used them in your projects?
Thank you, Apurva. I've just seen a good colleague of mine from UNU hub in
You
Hamburg.
can ask the good
Greetings to
colleague to
Nima.
join
Nima,
us.
join us. So I hope he comes. Thank you for the question. So when we speak about failing forward, then we must think about the design and the stage even before the start of any restoration actions on site. And when assessing the budget, already the spendings can be cut, unfortunately, but with that, there are some limitations. Here I come to the example of the biodiversity failure that happened due to the desire to cut the costs. May I please ask you to forward it? Thank you, thank you. These are the eucalyptus trees that were used to restore the land. In many regions worldwide, now this practice is banned. It is illegal to do so. But still, even in Germany, this picture is not from there, but still, even in Germany, we sometimes come to the sites of very recent land restoration efforts, let's say not more than 5 years old. And similarly, we see the monocultural trees being planted there just for the sake of cost cutting. And that is a clear example of failing forward. Maybe this is a good short-term solution, but in just few years, this will result in a failure due to many possible factors that can affect the stability of this biome after restoring it, and failing not physically, not failing due to some geotechnical issues, but just because of the chosen species used for land restoration. And here is an example of a forest that is now vulnerable to various diseases and to forest fires because of being monocultural.
I think you touched upon this right now, and it's a perfect segue into the next question that I have. It focuses a little bit on the Lusatian lignite mining district. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think for the past training that we've had with G20 Global Land Initiative and UNU Flores, there was a field visit as well to the region.
You are absolutely right. And since you have mentioned that, let me now show the program of that event. I've brought 2 copies of them. So, indeed, we organized this training, and according to anonymous polls, it was a success. And we plan continuing these hands-on workshops globally. Now I would like to share it with the audience so you can have a look and understand what is the format of education that we as the United Nations University and our partners at your side, G20 Global Land Initiative, offer to the participants, and what's more important, to the participants who can come fully funded from underprivileged regions to learn about the experience not only of Lusatia, where I am stationed now, where I am heading the branch office of UNU, but also in other regions where sometimes it is success, but sometimes it's also a story of some wrong moves that we would like to discuss as well.
Absolutely. And I think it would also be important to know what are some of the frameworks that you see that's been most effective in creating sustainable outcomes in the region. I'm sure some of these were already involved in the training program, but it'd be really interesting for our audience to also know what are some of these frameworks, what are some of the learnings that you've seen in your experience there.
Yes. So I believe it is the time to show the next picture that I've brought with me. I'm now improvising. I haven't prepared them exactly for some topics, but just trying to find a good fit to them. And it's not about Lusatia, but similarly it is about coal mining, as coal mining is a widespread phenomenon globally. And this one comes from the Svalbard archipelago in the high Arctic. We worked there some 10 years ago. And this is an example of acid water failure. We've been talking about physical, about biological, and now we are turning to geochemical factors. Even though these mines are operated by a Norwegian company, and Svalbard is also a place where UNIS, the University of Svalbard, is located with excellent researchers there, still there is a gap between their professional expertise in the field and their research outcomes and the real practice there. We took samples from that, let's name them stream, from that stream, and the pH was about 2. That is highly acidic and that is extremely dangerous to the environment. And with that, now returning to your question, this is the practice that can be avoided by creating the geochemical barriers, or as they are called in the United States, permeable barriers, that will prevent the flow of the acids from old mine pits and from old mine dams if they also generate acid drainage. And that is a kind of experience that I personally cannot name know-how. The concept of geochemical barriers was developed about half a century ago. But still, the implementation of these ideas leaps not forward, it is rather behind. Even though the techniques are well known and thousands of experiments on the lab scale showed the success if we want to implement this. But sometimes this important step is missed. So that is the example, just one example of the knowledge that we can share with the world.
And talking about knowledge sharing, as the UN, UNU Flores obviously works with a lot of partners, including G20 Global Land Initiative, in that sphere. But how important is knowledge sharing when it comes to international collaborations and to create sustainable outcomes out of it as well?
Well, your question already contains the answer. It is crucial. It is absolutely necessary. Without doing so, let's use high words, sustainable development cannot happen. If we stockpile our knowledge, if we practice silo thinking, then almost always we'll face some kinds of failures. And since now we are talking about our own contribution to the knowledge sharing and about our institute in Dresden that adopts the so-called resource nexus thinking, I've got the final picture to show today. I have prepared it with this title, Resource Nexus Failure. And here I'm not talking about the case of a geotechnical, of biological or chemical unsuccess. This is about a more difficult situation. So this is an example of Mongolia, one of the countries from where we accept our participants to learn from the experience of ours. And in Mongolia, we witnessed these mine dumps of the coal mine. That is in the central part of Mongolia, not yet in the Gobi Desert. It is more or less manageable, and it does not require hard and difficult attempts to do so. So these mine dumps that you see on the photo are safe, stable, and non-polluting. Everything according to the mantra that we in our sector repeat. And with that, they still pose the danger to the settlement there for the simple reason of blocking the airflow. The dumps themselves do not pose any hazard to the region. They are now stabilized, they are restored, and there is no danger of collapse, of acid mine drainage, but there is an issue of this town being in the valley. And when the polluted air is trapped there for months during the winter anti-cyclone weather, then there is no influx of fresh air. And people are hurt by that. They breathe in, they inhale polluted air from their own town, and the normal process of urban ventilation does not happen. This is an artificial canyon created there. So technically and strictly speaking, this is not a failure in restoration of the mine dumps, but it is a failure in the nexus thinking of the further effects. So these dumps should not be there at all, neither unrestored nor restored, because otherwise the only different solution is to resettle those people, to ask them to move somewhere else, just to avoid the danger to their health. So that is the failure that we can discuss and that we show as an example when we teach our courses. And the last point to that question, we also offer doctoral programs for the researchers who come from the global south. From the global south only, we do not use the donor money to sponsor those coming from already more or less developed regions, let's say of the US or Europe, but we sponsor them and we offer the grants for 3.5 years to come and to study and to write their dissertations with this nexus approach in mind.
On that note, I'd like to open the floor for questions. We do have a few moments, so it'll be lovely to hear any questions, any reflections that you may have.
Depuis le début du siècle, les sécheresses ont augmenté de 29%, aggravant les vulnérabilités à travers divers. Thank you very much, Aleksey. Yeah, just on that photograph you showed of the failure from long-term stockpiling of soils, what would you use to try and convince the CEOs, the mining managers, to change their mindset, to being able to avoid that stockpiling process, which puts us way on the back foot before we've even started restoration?
Thank you. I'm really glad that you're asking me about the mindset and not about the technical solutions, as we already have dozens of them. They are published in numerous documents, let's say, from ISO and to regional standards. So, as for mindset, I've been thinking about that pretty a lot. And I talked to my friends from different sectors, completely different sectors who have zero connection to land restoration or to mining. And from that, I've explored the more or less common comparison between the two sectors of civil aviation and medicine. So in civil aviation, hiding any failure is a no-go. All of them are investigated. They must be reported, any single case. And in medicine, typically, worldwide, the practice is on the opposite side. So a failure is something that can be discussed maybe with a couple of team members, but it is not something that is presented. Not something that is discussed, maybe due to the privacy of the information, maybe due to the desire to save the reputation of a particular hospital or clinic. And my personal perception is that we, as the industry of land restoration, are unfortunately closer to the medicine services than to the civil aviation. And as of now, there is no global protocol or global, at least adopted in the mind's approach on how to discuss the unsuccess of any measures taken to, let's say, rehabilitate the site after the end of heap leaching for gold. The success stories are well known, but we have no common agora to discuss that. And the thing that I've got in mind is something that is close to the startup industry, if we can call them industry. There are so-called, I apologize, English is not my mother tongue, I'm just citing the name, that is the official name, the fuck-up nights. When the IT guys and others who work on startups gather in one place, have a beer or have a tea cup, and they talk to each other about their stories of completely lost endeavor. I explored the information about these, let's name it, franchise of those nights. And almost all of them are only for the IT or AI sectors. But why can't we have the same? And by discussing this informally, those are nights, they are not days or evenings, the mindset, at least I believe so, can be shifted. So that is my hope.
Hi, Alexi. Thanks. As an agriculturist, I want to ask you this question. Do you see any place for monoculture vegetation in restoration? And if so, how does one prioritize land stabilization versus, the biodiversity importance?
So, yes, such cases exist, and let me come to this from the diverted route. As I've been recently talking to a person working on phytomining, or phytomining, how do we pronounce that? And the regulations to that kind of enterprise still come from the mining sector. But in fact, these practices are close to agriculture, and namely to the agriculture that use monoculture species. And with that, we see that sometimes these practices are considered to be unsustainable, but in fact, they are just under the burden of the legal requirements. And not only due to the economic restraints, this happens because of the, let's say, super control from the state. And that's not the case of only the countries in Europe or in North America. That can be witnessed worldwide. And so, with that, I believe that first, the change of the legislation can help in facilitating the change in agricultural sector as well. But still, I'm speaking not as an expert in agriculture. My field is in soil and mining, but I've got some exposure to the cases like that.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have today. And just taking inspiration from what you just mentioned about the mindset shift. You spoke about nights like these. It's pretty dark outside, I'm sure. So it's maybe evenings like these that would create that mindset shift. And it's experts like you, Alexei, that um, are creating that change itself. And I hope this inspires all of you to talk about failures and failures in order to overcome or as stepping stones to stories of success as well, especially in terms of driving successful land restoration projects around the world. So thank you so much for joining us. And please to take these conversations outside of this space as well. And Alexei, I'm sure you'll be here for a little bit around in the pavilion. So please feel free to have a conversation with him, possibly with a cup of tea, as you've seen here. But thank you so much for joining, and hope to see you around in the pavilion in the coming days. Thank you.
Thank you.